In this session, we're going to learn how to make a super simple icon animation. So icon animations are really helpful in product design. If you want to be a UX or UI designer, when you're creating web applications or mobile apps, if you've got icons in there that animate or little micro interactions throughout your app or website, it's really helpful for the user to have that reassurance and reiterate to them that they've actually made a move or clicked a button. So a good example of this would be if you're putting something into the trash on your Mac computer, for instance, you drop and drag that into the bin and your bin actually fills up. So this could help as well if we put something in the bin in After Effects interface. You can actually see something happen. So let's say, for instance, we create a composition, don't want this, and then we click and drag that into the bin. You can see that this bin actually changes, which is the hover state, and you've got a green plus as well. So it just reassures that something is actually happening. So one of my favorite quotes is, "Motion is confirmation." So if you've always got something moving on the screen, you're giving your user that confidence that something is happening behind the scenes and they're not at a standstill. So we're all familiar with the spinning wheel of death, which is the rainbow wheel, which we see in our Mac computers or laptops, which we all dread because it means that your project is probably about to crash or something is happening. But at least at times when it doesn't crash, you know that it's loading and the computer just isn't entirely frozen. So on that note, let's say we want to create a little icon animation when you drag something into the bin. So let's start off with creating a new composition. So we'll make this 500 by 500 and we'll call it delete. 3 seconds. I think it's maybe a little bit long. I think 2 seconds should be enough, but we can always change it later on. And here we are. So let's create a new shape layer. So for our bin, let's give it a fill of nothing and a stroke of white, just because we're on a black background. If you have a white background, you can make your stroke black. And let's go to our rounded rectangle tool to make our base of the bin. And a good little reference is this little bin here. So we can just refer to that. So let's just draw our rounded rectangle tool here. Now that we've got the base of our bin, we can just rename it here just so we've got that good organization of all of our layers. And this helps you when you get really busy and complex projects. So we've got the base of the bin. The anchor point for the bin isn't too vital in this instance because we're only going to give it a transition of left to right on the position at the end. But just for the sake of habit, you can always just move your anchor point to the center by clicking Y on your keyboard. So now we want to create our lid. Let's also do a new shape layer on top of that. And we want to make sure that we don't duplicate our shapes under the same layer. So if you don't add a new shape layer and you go ahead and draw the lid in like that, you're going to have two rectangles, which means you're not going to have that separated layer. So we won't be able to lift the bin off. So let's add a new shape layer. Let's draw our lid of the bin. And for this one, we want to fill it in because we don't want to see the base behind of it. And we want to move the anchor point to the bottom right hand side. And that is because we want, when we rotate it, we want it to lift up in the realistic way that a bin would, which is like this. If we had the anchor point where it currently was when I inserted the shape, it would have this strange rotation. And again, if we move the anchor point to the middle, we're going to have this kind of motion. So we want it on the bottom right hand side. Now we want to add another shape layer, which is the handle of the bin. Let's add that in. Doesn't matter whether you have a stroke or not because we're going to send the layer to the back anyway. And anchor point, just for habit, move it up. And what we're going to do now is just parent this to the lid of the bin. So it means whatever movement we make to this, the lid here, rename that, and we'll call this handle. Whatever changes we make to the lid, the handle is going to follow suit, and we don't need to animate that separately. Awesome. So we want to add the little finishing touches of the line. So we'll just add a new shape layer and use your pen tool for this. We don't need a fill. And we just click here, shift on your keyboard and click down. So we've got these sharp edges. If you like the sharp edges, that's fine. I always like the rounded look. So in your drop down under contents, shape, stroke, we'll change this line cap to a round cap. So now you can see we've got that rounded edge, and I just Command C, Command V, all of these shapes, and you can Command D, which is Command Duplicate, whatever you prefer. And we've got the lines on our base of the bin. So now I'm going to move them down underneath the lid and the handle, and I actually want to group all these together because when we move the bin left to right at the end, at least these will all move together as like their own little group as opposed to animating these all separately. Another way we could do it is move the base of the bin and change the position on that and just parent these guys to the base of the bin, and then they would just follow suit. But I just think it looks a little bit cleaner when you've got those pre-compositions. So call that base. So now we've got the lid, the handle, and the base. So the first thing we want to do is change the position and rotation of our lid. So at 0 frames, get your little blue ticker, blue ruler, blue guide, whatever you want to call it. Current time indicator is the real term. Position, rotation. So that's in position there, and you've got your anchor point at the bottom right. So now at 1 second, let's position that at 43 degrees. You can have it as much as you like. In my instance, because I've made a massive lid, my composition is quite short, so I can always go and change my composition settings. Let's make it 700 to give me more flexibility, and that means that I can then rotate that even more and then also adjust my position. So I can just move that up with my little arrow keys. So we've got quite a nice dramatic movement here. Obviously in your mobile app or whatever you're making, you can make it a little bit more subtle. And you can see there with that movement that our handle is just following exactly what it's what the lid is doing. So then what we want to do is copy the exact keyframes to close it. So you can move your time indicator to wherever you like, and I always just shortcut is just highlight those exact keyframes that were on 0 frames, copy and paste. And that way we know that it's in the exact position as it was before. Cool. And then we want to have this little kind of spark effect. So just bring a little micro delight to our bin animation. So let's create a new shape layer, and we can just draw kind of a 45-degree angle line. Under your shape, depending on if you like the harsh edges or not, I'm just going to change these to a round cap. And you see my anchor point is in the center here, which is automatically going to the center of the entire composition. It's not going to the center of my shape layer. So I just want to move that to the bottom of this shape layer 1. So what I'm going to do now is add a trim path effect. So you can play around with trim paths just to see the start and ending point. So at the point of the lid shutting, I kind of want like a little spark effect. So if we put in the end here, that's 0. So you're not going to see any shape at all. So when the lid actually shuts, I want this shape to appear entirely, like so. So you can see when you shut the lid, you've got that little kind of spark effect. I might want to pull it out a little bit so it takes a little bit longer. But because if you go to the beginning of the composition, you can see that the spark is there the whole time. We don't want that. So we want to cut the layer off here as soon as the lid shuts. And that way we're only going to see this little spark animation here from 10 to 14 frames. So if you click Option or Alt and then your left bracket, we've actually cut that layer off. So it means that you can't see it at the start at all. You can do the long haul way, which is dragging this layer, moving your keyframes, but we don't want to do that. So I would just recommend cutting that off there. And then you'll see now that we've got this little spark effect. And we can duplicate this 3 times, adjust the rotation, then move it position slightly. And you can have as many of these as you like. Go wild. And you can see that just that little extra bit of detail that takes like a minute to do just makes all the difference. So now going that little bit further, we want to shake the base. So the impact of that lid hitting the base is going to move it a little bit. So just give it a bit of a shake. So we want to lock in the position here. Then let's say 14 frames. Move the base slightly to the right. Then keep moving along. And then you can make your movements subtler as time progresses. And this doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to be so subtle and so quick that it's barely noticeable, but it's noticeable enough to make that little delightful moment. And at the end, you just copy your first keyframe and paste it so you know that it ends in the exact same position, and that will give us that good looping effect. So with all looping GIFs or animations, you need the ending point to look exactly the same as the beginning point. So that cute little bin took no time at all, and it just makes all the difference in your app or websites. And you can export this as a JSON file, which is code for developers, and there's a really cool plugin on After Effects for that. And you just give them the code and they can implement this directly into their app or website. So definitely create one of these bins, make it colorful, ramp it up. You can maybe put it in an app interface, and yeah, good luck.